She woke up disoriented, her heart racing in a room she had never seen before. Beside her, a man watched her in silence, a millionaire, enigmatic, dangerous. If you enjoy stories of love and romance, watch until the end, subscribe to this channel, and leave a comment saying where you're listening from. Emily adjusted her black blazer for the 10th time that night, observing her distorted reflection in the mirrored wall of the elevator ascending to the 26th floor of the Peninsula Hotel. The event, hosted by the American multinational, where she worked as a contract reviewer, was exactly the type of occasion she avoided. Drunk executives, empty conversations about numbers and goals, forced smiles hiding the brutal competitiveness of the corporate world. But her presence had been highly recommended by the regional director, a polite way of saying it was mandatory. At 26, Emily Parker had become an expert at going unnoticed. Neutral clothes, hair always tied back, subtle makeup that wouldn't draw attention to the green eyes that had been described as disturbing by more than one colleague. It was an armor carefully constructed over 8 years, since she had arrived in New York City with a new identity and a past she preferred to keep buried in the mountains of Virginia. The elevator stopped with a soft chime, and the doors opened, revealing a luxurious event hall decorated in golden tones and crystal. The murmur of conversations mixed with the discreet sound of a piano, while uniformed waiters circulated with trays of French champagne and elaborate canapés. Emily took a deep breath, put on her professional smile, and entered the environment, immediately heading toward the most discreet corner of the room. It was there, leaning against one of the panoramic windows offering a view of Central Park, that she saw him for the first time. Nathan Hayes was standing at the edge of the party, completely out of place among the smiling executives. Tall, he must have been around 6'1", with broad shoulders that perfectly filled the dark, impeccably cut suit. He wasn't wearing a tie, and the first button of his white shirt was open, revealing the base of his tanned neck. But it was his face that intrigued her. Strong features, firm chin, brown hair slightly disheveled, as if he had run his hands through it repeatedly, and the eyes. Even at a distance, Emily could perceive the intensity of that dark gaze that didn't fix on anything specific, but seemed to see through people, as if he could see hidden layers that others preferred to keep invisible. There was something familiar in that gaze, an old pain that she recognized because she carried a similar one in her chest. Emily tried to divert her attention, concentrating on the insipid conversation between two directors about currency market fluctuations, but her eyes inevitably returned to the mysterious man. He didn't smile, didn't greet anyone, didn't hold a champagne flute. He just observed like a predator studying his territory. That's when he saw her. The dark gaze fixed on hers across the crowded room, and Emily felt something strange happen. In her chest, a quickening of her heart that she hadn't experienced in years, mixed with a shiver that ran down her spine. He didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't make any gesture of social recognition. He simply stared at her as if he had known her for a long time, as if he could read every secret she kept behind that professional facade. Emily quickly looked away, feigning renewed interest in the conversation beside her, but she could feel those eyes burning her skin through her clothes. It was an uncomfortable sensation, and at the same time strangely exciting. It had been so long since someone had truly looked at her, not just at her body or appearance, but as if they wanted to decipher who she really was beneath all the layers of protection she had built. When she dared to look again in his direction, Nathan Hayes had disappeared. Emily swept the room with her eyes, searching for that imposing figure among the groups of executives, but he had simply evaporated like smoke. A strange feeling of loss hit her, mixed with relief. It was better this way. Men like that, intense, magnetic, dangerous, represented exactly the kind of complication she had learned to avoid. The party continued around her, but Emily felt disconnected from everything. The conversations seemed distant, the champagne had lost its taste, and a growing restlessness took hold of her body. It was as if that brief moment of visual connection with the stranger had awakened something she had kept carefully dormant, a hunger she didn't know she possessed, a desire she had always denied existed. She decided it was time to leave. She had fulfilled her social obligation, appeared at the event, talked with the necessary colleagues. Now she could return to her quiet apartment on the Upper East Side, take a hot shower, and try to forget that disturbing gaze that seemed to have unraveled her most intimate secrets with a simple glance. Emily headed to the elevator, quickly, saying goodbye to some colleagues along the way. The doors closed with a whisper, and she finally allowed her shoulders to relax. Only then did she realize she wasn't alone. The scent arrived first, polished wood mixed with sandalwood, and something darker, more masculine. She turned slowly and found Nathan Hayes leaning against the opposite wall of the elevator, watching her with that same disturbing intensity. The last thing Emily remembered was that fixed gaze on hers, as dark as the night that stretched beyond the hotel windows. After that, only darkness. Emily's first thought upon awakening was about the silence, a dense silence, almost palpable, that enveloped the environment like an invisible shroud. There wasn't the familiar noise of New York traffic, nor the distant sound of the sea that used to lull her mornings on the Upper East Side, just a sonic void that made her ears buzz. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the soft light filtering through white linen curtains. The ceiling above her was high, decorated with classic moldings suggesting an old but impeccably preserved construction. She turned her head to the side and found a room that seemed straight out of a European decorating magazine, walls covered with light wood panels, minimalist design furniture, a vase of white orchids on a cherry wood dresser. Emily tried to sit up, and a light dizziness made her lean against the pillows. She was lying in a king-size bed, covered with Egyptian linen sheets that cost more than her monthly salary. She was still wearing her clothes from the party, the black skirt and navy blue silk blouse, but her blazer had disappeared, as had her high-heeled shoes, which now rested neatly at the foot of the bed. The memory returned in fragments: the event at the hotel, the mysterious man, the elevator. And then, nothing. A black void that frightened her more than the strange situation in which she found herself. Emily never lost consciousness. It was one of her most distinctive characteristics, the constant lucidity, the permanent vigilance she had developed as a defense mechanism during her formative years in the religious community where she grew. But she forced herself to get up, ignoring the sensation of instability that still persisted. The floor was polished wood, heated by an invisible heating system. She walked to the window and pulled back the curtains, encountering a view that made her swallow hard. She was atop a hill, surrounded by preserved forest, with the ocean extending in the distance like a blue stain on the horizon. There were no visible roads, no neighboring buildings, only wild nature and complete isolation. Panic began to form in her chest, a familiar sensation she knew too well. She quickly headed to the door, an imposing piece of solid wood with antique hardware. She turned the handle, pushed, pulled. Nothing. The door was locked from the outside and there was no internal lock. Emily banged on the wood with her fists, shouting for someone to hear her. Her voice echoed in the empty room, but there was no response. It was then that she noticed the security camera discreetly installed in the upper right corner, its dark lens pointed directly at the bed. Someone was watching her. She ran to the adjoining bathroom, hoping to find a window or another exit, but found only a luxurious environment lined with Carrara marble. There were expensive brand hygiene products, fluffy towels folded with military perfection, and her own reflection in the mirror that occupied an entire wall. But when she looked at herself, Emily had the second shock of the morning. She didn't look like herself. Her face was more flushed, her lips slightly swollen as if she had been kissed, and there was a subtle mark on her neck. Not an injury, but something like the impression of fingers that had touched her with softness. More disturbing still, her hair smelled of sandalwood, the same perfume she had smelled in the elevator. She returned to the room in hurried steps, looking for clues about where she was and how she had gotten there. On the dresser, she found a tray with fresh fruits, artisanal breads, imported jams, and a thermos of still hot coffee. Someone had prepared that coffee recently, which meant she wasn't alone in that place. That's when she heard the footsteps in the hallway. Slow, measured, approaching the door. Emily instinctively backed away, her heart pounding in her chest. The key turned in the lock with a metallic click, and the door opened, revealing the figure she already expected to see but which still made her hold her breath. Nathan Hayes entered the room with the same naturalness of someone who is in his own home, which Emily realized with growing horror was probably true. He had exchanged the formal suit for a white linen shirt and dark pants, but the intensity of his gaze remained unchanged. He carried in his hands a porcelain cup and saucer, which he carefully placed on the center table. "You slept for 16 hours, he said, his deep voice echoing in the silent environment. "I was worried." Emily found her own voice, rough from disuse. "Where am I? What did you do to me?" Nathan didn't answer immediately. He approached the window, observing the landscape outside as if seeing it for the first time. "This was my mother's favorite view," he murmured, more to himself than to her. She said the ocean reminded her that there was always a place to escape to. "Answer my question!" Emily exploded, anger overriding fear. "Did you drug me? Kidnap me? Who the hell do you think you are?" He turned to face her, and for the first time since entering the room, his eyes met hers. "Nathan Hayes, and you asked me to bring you here." The statement hit her like a punch to the stomach. "That's a lie. I would never ask for such a thing. I didn't even know you before last night." "Are you sure?" Nathan tilted his head, studying her with scientific curiosity. "Don't you remember saying you wanted to disappear, that you were tired of living a life that wasn't yours, that you needed a place where you could be who you really are, without masks, without lies?" Emily felt the floor sway beneath her feet. The words sounded vaguely familiar, like echoes of thoughts she had had, but never verbalized. Not to him. Not to anyone. "You're lying," she whispered, but the certainty in her voice had faltered. Nathan approached slowly, as if she were a frightened animal that might flee at any moment. "Am I lying about having a helicopter that brought us here? About this being my private property, where nobody can bother us? Or am I lying about you begging me in the elevator to take you to a place where you could finally stop pretending?" His words created fragmented images in her mind, the luxurious interior of a helicopter, the wind on her skin, a sensation of lightness she hadn't experienced in years. But they were just flashes, like pieces of a dream that dissolved upon awakening. "I don't remember any of that," she said, but her voice came out weaker than intended. "No," agreed Nathan, stopping 2 meters away. "And that's exactly why you're here." The following days dissolved into a strange and disturbing routine. Nathan didn't touch her, didn't threaten her, didn't show any aggressiveness. He simply was. He appeared in the morning with fresh coffee and fruits, left books on the dresser, always, titles she had mentioned liking at some point in her life, though she didn't remember having shared that information with him. In the afternoon he brought new clothes, expensive pieces in natural fabrics that fit her body perfectly, as if he knew every curve, every measurement. Emily had tried to escape 3 times. The first time she discovered that the door of the room led to a long labyrinthine corridor, full of other closed doors and old paintings of sad-eyed women. When she reached what appeared to be the main exit, she found it locked by a sophisticated electronic system. On her second attempt, she managed to reach a balcony, but the dizzying height and absence of any means of descent made her turn back. On the third, Nathan simply waited for her at the door, leaning against the wall as if he knew exactly what she was planning. "You can explore the entire house," he had said, his calm voice contrasting with her frustration, "except the basement. And don't worry about trying to leave, there's no way, unless I allow it." It was on that third night that Emily began to truly explore the environment where she was imprisoned. The room was larger than she had initially perceived, with a small adjoining office equipped with a shelf full of books in various languages. There was also a wardrobe that seemed to have been assembled specifically for her, French lace lingerie, elegant dresses, even shoes that fit perfectly on her feet. But it was when examining the bed more carefully that Emily made her first disturbing discovery. On the noble wood headboard, almost imperceptible under old varnish, there were engraved marks, names, dates, and short phrases that made her blood freeze. Maria Elena, 1987, he promised love. Carla Mendes, 1995, don't trust his tears. Sandra Luce, 2001, You believe too. Emily ran her fingers over the inscriptions, feeling the grooves in the wood. How many women had passed through that room? How many had slept in that same bed, looked out the same window, felt the same mixture of fear and fascination that now consumed her? That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark, listening to the sounds of the house. Wood creaking, wind in the trees outside, and something else. Whispers. Very low female voices, coming from within the walls, as if the very structure held echoes of old conversations. At times she seemed to hear laughter, other times restrained crying. When she finally fell asleep, the dreams came with an intensity that left her breathless. She dreamed of a brown-haired boy crying in a dark basement, calling for someone who never came. She dreamed of a woman in a white dress who walked the hallways of the house, leaving wet footprints on the floor. And she dreamed of her own mother, who had disappeared when she was 9 years old, whispering something about the chosen blood and the marked time. She woke with the rising sun and Nathan sitting in an armchair beside the bed, watching her. Sleep? There was no embarrassment on his face, only an intense curiosity that made her feel like a specimen being studied. "You talk in your sleep," he said, resting his chin on his hand. "You call for Michael. Who is Michael?" Emily pulled the sheets up to her chin, trying to create a barrier between them. "I don't know what you're talking about. You also scream, 'Don't leave me here,' and you repeat numbers. 21, 21, 21. Does that have any special meaning?" His words brought flashes of fragmented images. A calendar on the wall, someone crossing. Off days with a red pencil, a sense of growing urgency. But when she tried to focus on the memories, they dissolved like vapor. "Where is my cell phone?" She changed the subject. "My purse? My documents?" "Safe," replied Nathan, rising from the armchair. "Like you." "I'm not safe, I'm trapped." He approached the bed, and for the first time in days, Emily could see a shadow of emotion cross his face. Pain, perhaps, or something that looked like regret. "Do you know the difference between imprisonment and protection?" he asked, his voice softer. "The intention of whoever keeps the door locked." Emily felt something move in her chest, not fear, but a strange compassion she didn't want to feel. There was something broken in that man, a deep wound he carried like a second skin. "And what is your intention, Nathan?" He remained silent for a long moment, studying his own reflection in the mirror on the opposite wall. "My mother used to say that some people are born with a hole in their chest, a void they try to fill with people, objects, achievements, but the hole never closes completely." "And you think I can close yours?" Nathan turned to her, and Emily saw something in the dark eyes that made her hold her breath. Vulnerability, need, an emotional hunger so intense it was frightening. "I think," he said slowly, "that you also have a hole in your chest, and that maybe together we can find a way to make the emptiness less painful." That afternoon, when Nathan left as he always did, disappearing for hours without explanation, Emily decided to investigate the room more deeply. It was kneeling on the floor examining the floorboards that she discovered a small irregularity near the window. One of the boards was loose, and when she lifted it, she found a hollow space where someone had hidden personal objects. There was an old cassette tape, a diary with yellowed pages, and a faded Polaroid photo of a blonde woman hugging a dark-eyed boy. On the back of the photo, feminine handwriting said, "Nathan, 8 years old. Last happy day." Emily put the tape in the small sound system that was in the room, and the voice that came from the speakers made her heart stop. It was a woman, speaking with contained urgency. "If you're hearing this, it's because he chose you. As he chose, all of us, and you like me, believed you could save him. But he doesn't want to be saved, dear. He wants you to get lost with him. You have until the 21st day. After that, the room doesn't let anyone out anymore, not even in thought." The recording continued with details that made Emily feel nausea. Other women, other escape attempts, other broken promises, and a pattern that repeated 21 days, always 21 days. Emily ran to the wall, and began scratching with her nails, marking each day that had passed there. When she finished, she counted the marks 3 times, hoping she had made a mistake. 19 days. Only 2 remained. The discovery about the 21 days transformed Emily from a resigned prisoner into a woman desperate for answers. She spent the entire night searching every inch of the room, looking for more clues, more secrets hidden in the cracks of that luxurious prison. It was under the mattress that she found more writings, small pieces of paper where other women had left fragmented messages. He cries when he thinks you're not looking. The brother is alive. Look in the basement. The key is with Michael. Michael, the name she screamed during sleep, according to Nathan. But who was Michael? In the photos scattered throughout the house, Emily had seen only Nathan as a child, alongside a blonde woman she presumed to be his mother. There was never any mention of brothers, of other family members. It was as if Michael were a ghost, haunting both her dreams and that silent house. When Nathan appeared the next morning with the usual coffee tray, Emily was waiting for him, sitting in the armchair with the diary found in the hiding place open in her lap. He stopped at the door when he saw her, his eyes immediately fixing on the object in her hands. "Where did you find that?" His voice carried a tension she hadn't heard before. "Your mother was a good writer," responded Emily, leafing through the yellowed pages. "She describes you as a sensitive, intelligent child, always asking about the father you never knew, always trying to protect your younger brother from her crises." Nathan entered the room and closed the door behind him, but kept his distance. "So you shouldn't be reading that." "Why, because it reveals that you lied to me?" Emily stood up, holding the diary like a weapon. "Your mother didn't disappear, Nathan. She killed herself, in this room, and you know exactly where the body of your brother Michael is." The silence that followed was dense as fog. Nathan leaned against the wall, running his hands through his hair in a gesture that Emily was beginning to recognize as a sign of extreme stress. "Michael was 17 when it happened," he finally said, his voice almost a whisper. "He was special. He couldn't distinguish reality from imagination. He saw things, heard voices, conversed with people who didn't exist. My mother thought it was a gift, not an illness." Emily felt something contract in her chest. "And you? What did you think?" "I thought it was my responsibility to protect him. It always was. Since our mother began to have the episodes, I was the one who took care of him, who kept him safe when she—" Nathan stopped, swallowing hard. "When she began to believe that we were the incarnation of something divine, that we had been chosen for a special mission." His words echoed something deep in Emily's memory. Special mission, chosen blood. They were terms that her own father used in the sect where she grew up. What kind of mission? Purify the world, through true love. Find the right women, those who could understand our special nature and join us in an eternal spiritual union. Nathan laughed, but the sound was bitter. She brought women home, always young, always lost, always needing someone to save them, and they stayed for weeks, sometimes months. In the room where I am now. Yes, it was her sanctuary, the place where the chosen ones were prepared for the final transformation. Emily felt nausea rise up her throat. Prepared how? Nathan moved away from the wall and walked to the window, observing the forest outside. Isolated from the outside world, fed with stories about eternal love, about being special, about being part of something bigger. Gradually convinced that life out there was an illusion, that true happiness only existed within these walls. And it worked? For a time. They began to believe. Some even became grateful for the salvation. But a moment always came when they questioned, tried to leave, discovered the truth. Emily closed her eyes, trying to control the tremor that was beginning to take over her hands. And then my mother convinced them to stay permanently, forever. The meaning of his words hit her like a punch. She killed them. She said she freed them, that she helped them transcend the prison of the physical body to live eternally in pure love. Nathan turned to look at her, and Emily saw tears in the dark eyes. Michael witnessed 3 of these transcendences. He was traumatized, began to have nightmares, to talk about the women who came to visit him at night, asking for help. And you? Where were you during all this? At university, in Boston. I only came home for the holidays. My mother always arranged an excuse for the absences. The women had found husbands, moved to other cities, decided to restart their lives elsewhere. Nathan took a deep breath. It was Michael who told me the truth, the last time I was here. Emily approached him slowly, the diary still in her hands. What happened to him? He tried to save the last woman, Isabella. She was 19, had arrived 3 weeks earlier. Michael managed to open the door of the room on the 21st day, when my mother was preparing the ceremony. Isabella tried to flee, but fell down the main staircase, broke her neck. And Michael had a nervous breakdown, started screaming that it was his fault, that he should have acted sooner. My mother said he was contaminated by external negativity and needed to be purified too. Nathan closed his fists. When I arrived home the next day, I found them both. She had given poison to him and then taken it herself. They were embraced, in this bed, with a letter explaining that they had decided to join the liberated souls who took care of the house. Emily felt her legs weaken. She leaned against the wall, trying to process the enormity of what she was hearing. But you said Michael is alive. The messages from the other women. Nathan remained silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was laden with a pain so intense that Emily felt a desire to embrace him. Michael didn't die. The poison wasn't enough to kill him, just left him in a vegetative state. He's been in the basement for 15 years, connected to machines that keep his body functioning. He looked directly into her eyes. And sometimes, very rarely, he opens his eyes and speaks. About what? About you. 3 months ago, he began to repeat your name, Emily Parker. He said you were coming, that it was time to break the cycle, that you were different from the others. Emily felt the world spin around her. That's impossible. I had never heard of you before that night at the hotel. Not consciously, agreed Nathan. But Michael always had abilities. He saw things that hadn't happened yet, knew about people before meeting them. That's how our mother found him. He predicted her arrival. Found who? Nathan approached her, and for the first time since she had been there, Emily didn't back away. There was something different in his eyes, no longer the predatory intensity, but a raw vulnerability that left her breathless. Our mother wasn't our biological mother, Emily. She adopted us when I was 8 and Michael was 5. She said we had been chosen to continue a special lineage, initiated long ago by a wise woman who understood the secrets of true love. Emily let the diary fall to the floor. What woman? A religious leader who lived in the mountains of Virginia. A woman who mysteriously disappeared 17 years ago, leaving behind a 9-year-old daughter. Nathan extended his hand to touch her face. A woman named Sarah Light. And who was your mother? The revelation about her mother hit Emily like lightning, shattering the last defenses she still maintained erect. Sarah Light. The name echoed in her mind, bringing with it fragments of memories she had buried so deeply that she had come to believe they were a product of her imagination. The brown-haired woman who hugged her on stormy nights, whispering lullabies that spoke of guardian angels. The same woman who one day simply wasn't there anymore when she woke up, leaving only the strict father and the explanation that God had called Mother for a special mission. You're lying, whispered Emily, but the words came out weak, without conviction, because deep down some primitive part of her being recognized the truth in what Nathan had just revealed. I wish I was, he replied, his hand still extended toward her face. It would be much simpler if you were just another lost woman who caught my attention, but you're not, Emily. You're the daughter of the woman who created this cycle, the missing piece to end it, definitively. Emily moved away from him, needing space to process the enormity of that information. If my mother was involved with you, why don't I remember? Why did my father never talk about it? Because she fled. When she realized our adoptive mother was misinterpreting the teachings, transforming love into possession, salvation into death. Your mother tried to take all of us away, me, Michael, and you, but she only managed to save you. The images began to form in Emily's mind like pieces of a long-forgotten puzzle. A car journey in the middle of the night, her mother crying as she drove, repeating that she was doing this out of love. The arrival at the religious community where her father was already waiting, with new documents, a new story, a new life, for the two of them. She left you behind, said Emily, and it wasn't a question. She tried to come back, Nathan continued, approaching again. For years she sent letters, called, even appeared at the property a few times. But our adoptive mother had convinced us that your mother was a traitor, someone who had abandoned the sacred family out of cowardice. We were children, Emily. We believed what they told us. And later, when you grew up, when I turned 18 and gained access to the family documents, I discovered the truth. Sarah hadn't abandoned us. She had tried to save us. But it was too late. Michael was already sick. Our adoptive mother was already completely lost in madness, and I... Nathan paused, swallowing hard. I had already become part of the problem. Emily turned to face him. What do you mean? At 16, I began to bring girls home, not because I believed in my mother's crazy theories, but because I liked the power. The ability to make someone dependent on me, to be the center of another person's universe. I thought I was controlling the situation, but in reality I was perpetuating the cycle. The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep in Emily's chest. She recognized that tone. It was the same one she heard in her own voice when she admitted to herself the darkest parts of her personality. How many women? 17 over 15 years. All young, all lost, all needing someone to save them. Nathan approached the window, observing the clouds that were beginning to form on the horizon. But none of them died, Emily. That was my only rule. After 21 days, I let them go. I arranged jobs for them, apartments, a new life away from here. And they simply accepted leaving. At the beginning, yes. The first ones were easy, they were relieved to escape. But the more recent ones, he paused, the more recent ones began to question why exactly 21 days, as if there was a part of them that knew something important was about to happen. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. Michael, he was communicating with them. Nathan nodded. In the last 5 years, he began to wake up for increasingly long periods, and he always talked about a woman who was coming, who would be different from the others, a woman who wouldn't be saved by me but who would save me. And you believe that? For the first time since she had met him, Emily saw Nathan smile, not the controlled and calculated smile he used as a mask, but something genuine, almost childlike. I didn't believe in anything for a long time, but then you appeared at that event with your green eyes full of secrets, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt hope. Emily closed her eyes, trying to organize her thoughts. 20 days had passed since her arrival. Only one day remained until the deadline the other women had mentioned. One day to decide whether to stay or leave. One day to discover if Michael was right about her being different. I want to see him, she said suddenly. Nathan looked at her with surprise. Michael? Yes, if he has really been talking about me, if he can break this cycle, then I need to talk to him. Emily, he's not easy to see. 15 years connected to machines have done terrible things to his body. I don't care about his appearance. I care about the answers he might have. Nathan remained silent for a long moment, studying her face as if trying to decipher some secret code. Finally, he sighed and headed to the door. All right. But first, you need to understand something. Michael isn't just my brother, he's special. He always was. And in recent years, since he began to awaken, he developed a kind of connection with the women who pass through this room. He sees through their eyes, feels through their hearts. Emily frowned. What does that mean? It means he already knows you better than you know yourself. And it means that when you meet, you'll understand things about your own history that you would prefer not to know. The basement of the mansion was accessed by a narrow staircase hidden behind a discreet door in the main corridor. Nathan went down first, turning on the lights as they advanced. The environment was clean and well ventilated, looking more like a private medical room than a basement. Modern machines hummed softly, monitors displayed lines and numbers that Emily couldn't decipher. And in the center of it all, in an adjusted hospital bed, was Michael. Emily held her breath. The man before her had the same bone structure as Nathan, the same dark eyes, but 15 years of immobility had left his body as fragile as paper. Tubes connected to his nose and arms, and his skin had the translucent pallor of someone who hasn't seen the sun in a very long time. But when Emily approached the bed, Michael's eyes opened, and what she saw in them made her step back. Recognition. As if he had been waiting for her for years. "Emily," said Michael, his voice weak but clear. "Finally. I was getting worried that you wouldn't arrive in time." "In time for what?" Michael smiled, and Emily saw in that smile echoes of the boy he had been before everything fell apart. "In time to save all of us, including yourself." Michael asked Nathan to leave them alone, and surprisingly he obeyed without question. Emily was left alone with the man who seemed to know her better than she knew herself, feeling a strange familiarity she couldn't explain. There was something in his dark eyes that both reassured and terrified her. "You remember me," said Michael, not as a question but as a statement. "You may not remember consciously, but your body remembers. Your heart remembers." Emily pulled a chair close to the hospital bed. "I dream about you. A boy crying, asking for help, but I don't understand how this is possible if we're only meeting now." "Because it's not now that we're meeting. You were 9 years old the last time you saw me. I was 6. Michael tried to move, but the tubes limited his movements. "It was the day your mother came to get us, the day everything changed forever." His words triggered something in Emily's mind, not a clear memory, but a sensation. The smell of rain, the sound of tires on gravel, a feeling of urgency and fear. "I was here before, in this house. For 3 months. Your mother had brought you to meet the special family she had helped form. At the time, our adoptive mother hadn't gone completely insane yet. She was just intense, controlling, but you and I became inseparable." Emily closed her eyes, trying to reach these buried memories. Flashes began to appear, running through wood corridors, hiding in the attic during the ceremonies, a sad-eyed boy who protected her when the adults became too strange. "You used to say that one day you would come back to save me," continued Michael, a melancholic smile touching his lips. "That when you grew up, you would be strong enough to get all of us out of there. But my mother took me away. Because she discovered what our adoptive mother really planned to do with us. Sarah realized it wasn't about creating a special family, but about forming the next generation of a cursed lineage." Michael coughed, a weak and painful sound. "Do you know what happened to your real father?" Emily frowned. "My father? He's alive. He lives in the religious community where I grew up." "That's not your biological father, Emily. That's the man your mother married to hide you from your real father, to protect you from him." The world seemed to tilt beneath Emily's feet. "What are you talking about?" Michael turned his head with difficulty to look at her directly. "Your real father is the man who started all of this, the founder of the lineage. He didn't die, as your mother said. He simply waited." Emily rose abruptly from the chair, walking to the opposite wall. The revelations were coming too fast, too intense. "This doesn't make sense. If my biological father is alive, why did he never try to find me? Who said he didn't try?" Michael managed to turn his body slightly in the bed. "Why do you think you developed those memory lapses? Those moments of lost consciousness that began after your mother's disappearance?" Emily felt the blood freeze. In her veins, the blackouts, small periods of lost time that had haunted her since she was 9. She had always assumed they were a consequence of trauma, but now he was entering your mind, planting seeds, preparing you for when the time came. Michael tried to sit up, but the machines prevented him. "Emily, You need to understand. All of this, you meeting Nathan, coming to this house, staying in this room, none of it was a coincidence. It was all orchestrated. By whom? By him, your father. He knew you would be the only one capable of breaking the cycle because you carry his blood, but also your mother's love, the only one who could resist the control and still choose to stay. Emily returned to the chair, her legs trembling. Choose? To stay for what? Michael looked at her with deep sadness in his eyes. To complete the ritual, to become the mother of the next generation of the lineage. With Nathan. The words fell on Emily like molten lead. No, that's insane. I would never agree to something like that. Not consciously, but you've already been being prepared for 20 days. The isolation, the growing emotional dependence, the attraction you feel for Nathan. Michael paused. Do you really think these feelings are genuine? Emily thought about the moments of growing intimacy with Nathan, the way she had begun to long for his presence, the way her body responded when he was nearby. She had assumed it was natural attraction, but now she questioned every sensation, every thought. The room, she whispered. There's something in the room that affects the women. Not the room itself, but what's beneath it. Michael managed to point to the floor. Right below where you've been sleeping, there's a chamber. It's where our adoptive mother performed the rituals, where she killed the other women, and it's where their remains still are. Emily felt nausea rise up her throat. The voices I hear at night. It's them, trying to warn you, trying to prevent you from making the same mistake they made. Michael extended his trembling hand toward her. Emily, you need to get out of here, today, before it's too late. But you said I was the only one who could break the cycle. You can, but not in the way they expect. The cycle breaks when you choose not to perpetuate it, when you refuse the role that was designated for you since birth. Emily took Michael's fragile hand, feeling the skin as cold as paper. And Nathan? Does he know all of this? Nathan is both victim and accomplice. Part of him genuinely fell in love with you, but another part is still following the programming he received since childhood. He believes you are destined to be together, that it's true love. He can't distinguish between real feeling and manipulation. And you? How can you see all of this so clearly? Michael smiled sadly. Because I spent 15 years in this state, conscious but unable to act. Observing, listening, understanding. The machines that keep my body alive also protected my mind from the influence that permeates this house. I am the only one who can see the situation as it really is. Emily leaned over the bed, bringing her face close to his. Michael, if I manage to get out of here, I can take you with me. We can find treatment for you, a better life. No. The answer was firm, despite the fragility of the voice. My body has passed the point of recovery, but you can save Nathan. If you can make him choose to leave with you, the influence will be broken for him too. How? By destroying the source. What's in the chamber beneath the room needs to be eliminated. The bones, the ritual objects, everything. As long as that exists, this house will continue exerting its influence on anyone who stays too long. Emily felt a determination growing in her chest. How do I get there? Michael squeezed her hand with more strength than she imagined possible. There's a secret entrance behind the mirror in your room. Have you noticed that it doesn't reflect right sometimes? That it shows things that aren't there? Emily remembered. Several times she had seen movement in the mirror when she was alone, shadows that moved independently of any light source. Press the lower right corner of the frame. The mirror will rotate, revealing a staircase, but Emily... Michael pulled her closer. When you go down there, you'll see terrible things. You'll feel the presence of the women who died, and you'll completely understand what your father planned for you. My father is here in the house. Michael closed his eyes as if the next revelation would cost him an immense effort. He never left. He's in the east wing of the mansion, in a suite that Nathan thinks is just a closed guest room, waiting for you to complete the 21 days. Waiting for the ritual to finally be performed. Emily stood up, adrenaline running through her veins. 20 days. Tomorrow would be the 21st. The time was running out, and now she finally understood what she needed to do. Michael, if I manage to destroy the chamber and confront my father, will Nathan be free from the influence? If he chooses to be free. Free will still exists, Emily. Even under influence, people can still choose. But you need to give him real reasons to choose you instead of the programming. Emily kissed Michael's cold forehead, a gesture that seemed to awaken dormant memories of an old and precious friendship. I will save him, and I'll save you too somehow. As she headed to the stairs, Michael called her one last time. Emily, your mother left something for you. It's hidden in the chamber, along with the other things, a letter. Read it before doing anything else. You'll need the strength she left in those words. Emily climbed the stairs with a clear purpose for the first time in 20 days. It was time to face what had been planned for her. It was time to break the cycle definitively. Emily returned to the room with her heart beating erratically, each word from Michael echoing in her mind like warning bells. The mirror on the opposite wall seemed different now, no longer a simple reflection, but a portal to truths she had spent 20 days avoiding facing. She approached it slowly, observing her own distorted image in the ancient surface. She was thinner, her eyes larger and brighter, as if the intensity of the past days had etched something new in her features. She pressed the lower right corner of the ornate frame as Michael had instructed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft click, the mirror rotated on a hidden hinge, revealing a narrow opening carved into the wall itself. A stone staircase spiraled down into darkness, and a cold, damp air rose from the depths, carrying an odor that made Emily instinctively recoil. Cinnamon, incense, and something else sweeter and more nauseating that she preferred not to identify. She found a flashlight in the room and descended the worn steps, each footfall echoing in the confined space. The staircase opened into a circular chamber, carved into the natural rock of the hill, illuminated by candles that lit themselves as she advanced, as if responding to her presence. The walls were covered with engraved symbols that she vaguely recognized, the same ones that decorated the sacred books of the community where she grew up, but distorted, altered in a way that made them seem to pulse with a sinister energy. In the center of the chamber, there was a black stone altar, and around it, arranged in concentric circles, were the remains Michael had mentioned. Not complete skeletons, but carefully arranged bones, interspersed with personal objects, rings, necklaces, faded photographs of smiling young women who didn't know the fate that awaited them. Emily counted 17 distinct piles, each representing a life interrupted by the madness of a woman who confused possession with love. But it was behind the altar that she found what really mattered. A small ceramic urn with her name engraved. On the side and beside it, a letter sealed with red wax. With trembling hands, Emily opened the envelope and unfolded the pages yellowed by moisture. "My dear Emily," began her mother's familiar handwriting, "if you're reading this, it means you managed to resist long enough to discover the truth. It means that the strength I always saw in you has proven greater than the programming they tried to imprint on your mind since before birth." Emily sat on the cold floor, leaning her back against the rocky wall as she continued reading. "I need to tell you about your real father, about how we met and why I fled with you on that rainy night 17 years ago. He wasn't just the leader of a religious sect, as you've always imagined. He was something much worse, a man who discovered how to use spirituality as a tool of control, how to transform love into dependence and faith into slavery." The following lines detailed a story that made Emily feel nauseated. Her biological father, Marcus Hayes, had developed an obsession with the idea of creating a lineage of special children, genetically and spiritually selected to be the leaders of a new era. He used rituals, drugs, and psychological manipulation, techniques to attract young and impressionable women, convincing them that carrying his children was a sacred mission. "I was young, lost and needy when I met him," the letter continued. "I believed his words about transcendental love, about being chosen for something grand. I only realized the truth when I was pregnant with you and saw what he did to the other women, how he discarded them after they gave birth, claiming they had fulfilled their divine purpose, how the children were raised not as sons and daughters, but as projects of his megalomaniacal fantasies." Emily paused in her reading, remembering Michael's words about Nathan and him having been adopted. Now she understood. They weren't Marcus's sons by chance, but specifically chosen to be part of his sick experiment. I fled when I discovered that Marcus planned to use you as a breeder when you reached sufficient age. That the whole purpose of your existence in his mind was to generate the next generation of his cursed lineage. I took you away and married Paul, a good man who agreed to raise you as his own daughter, pretending to be your biological father to protect your identity. Tears began to stream down Emily's face. Paul, the strict but loving man she had always called father, had sacrificed his own life to protect her from a truth she wasn't prepared to face. But I knew Marcus wouldn't give up easily, so I planted the seeds of resistance in your mind from when you were little. The memory lapses you developed weren't caused by him trying to control your thoughts. They were your natural defenses manifesting, blocking the attempts at invasion. You are stronger than you imagine, my daughter, strong enough to break a cycle that began long before your birth. Emily turned the page, finding detailed instructions on how to destroy the power of the ritual chamber. There were specific components, buried in each pile of bones that needed to be removed and burned in a particular order. Symbols on the walls that should be erased with an acidic solution her mother had hidden in a small bottle behind the altar. Always remember that true love doesn't imprison, doesn't control, doesn't diminish. True love liberates, strengthens, and honors the individuality of the other person. If Nathan truly loves you, he will choose your freedom above his own need. And if you love him, you will give him the opportunity to make that choice. The last lines of the letter brought more tears to Emily's eyes. I know I couldn't be present to guide you through life, but I hope these words give you the courage necessary to choose your own destiny. You are not a piece in anyone's game, Emily. You are a strong, intelligent woman capable of true love. Don't let anyone, not even someone who claims to love you, take that away from you. Emily carefully folded the letter and put it in her pocket. Then, following her mother's instructions, she began the meticulous work of dismantling the altar of horror. She removed the ritual components from each pile of bones, small amulets made of darkened metal, crystals stained with substances she preferred not to identify, and small scrolls with incantations written in red ink. As she worked, she felt the presence of the dead women around her, not as haunting ghosts but as silent witnesses who approved of her actions. An inexplicable breeze moved the candle flames, and at times she heard whispers of encouragement, female voices saying, "Continue, you can do it, free us." The process took hours. When she finally finished applying the acidic solution to the symbols on the walls, watching them dissolve and disappear as if they had never existed, Emily felt a physical change in the environment. The air became lighter, the nauseating odor disappeared, and the candles went out one by one until only her flashlight illuminated the chamber. That's when she heard the footsteps on the stairs. Nathan descended slowly, his silhouette cut against the light coming from the room above. When he reached the foot of the stairs and saw Emily surrounded by the debris of the altar, his face went through a series of expressions: surprise, comprehension, and finally a deep sadness. "You found out," he said, his voice echoing in the empty space. "I found out many things. The question is, what are you going to do now that I know?" Nathan approached slowly, observing the scattered bones, the erased symbols on the walls. "My adoptive mother used to bring me here when I was a child. She said this place was sacred, that one day I would understand its true purpose." "And do you understand?" He stopped a few meters away, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders curved as if carrying an invisible weight. "I understand that I've spent my entire life being manipulated by people who confused obsession with love, that each woman I brought to this room was an unconscious attempt to recreate something I never had, a genuine connection, based on free choice, not on need or programming." Emily stood up, cleaning her hands on her clothes. "And with me, was it different?" Nathan looked her in the eyes, and Emily saw something in them that she hadn't noticed before, a clarity that didn't exist in the previous days, as if the destruction of the altar had broken a spell that kept him partially blind. "With you it was real, terrifyingly real. For the first time in my life, I didn't know what to expect, couldn't control what I felt. And that scared me so much that I tried to force you to fit the familiar pattern." Nathan extended his hand toward her, but didn't touch her. "Emily, I love you. Not the version of you that I tried to create, but who you really are. Strong, independent, capable of challenging me and making me want to be a better person. Prove it." The word came out harsher than she intended, but Nathan didn't seem offended. He just nodded as if he expected exactly that response. "What do you want me to do?" Emily pointed to the stairs. "Leave with me, now. Leave this house, this life, all of this behind. Start from scratch like I did at 18. And if I say I can't, that I have responsibilities here, then I'll know you're still being controlled by what happened in this chamber." Emily began heading to the stairs. "The choice is yours, Nathan, but I've already made mine." As she climbed the steps, Emily heard Nathan following her. But she knew that the true test would come soon, when they faced the last piece of the puzzle, the man who had orchestrated everything from the beginning. Emily emerged from the secret passage with Nathan right behind her, but the atmosphere of the room had completely changed. The curtains were open, allowing the golden light of late afternoon to flood the environment, and sitting in the armchair where Nathan used to observe her was a man she had never seen, but whom she instantly recognized. The same green eyes she saw in the mirror, the same jawline, the same brown hair, now graying and combed back with military precision. Marcus Hayes was in his 60s, but maintained the erect posture and imposing bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. He wore an impeccable dark suit and held a crystal glass with some amber drink. He smiled when he saw them emerge from the passage, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My dear daughter, finally we meet properly." Emily felt Nathan move beside her, discreetly positioning himself between her and Marcus, but the older man made a casual gesture that made him stop in place. "Nathan, my boy, there's no need for protection. I'm here just to talk with Emily about her future. Our future. You're not my father," said Emily, her voice firmer than she imagined she could produce. "Paul Parker is my father. You're just the man who gave me genetic material." Marcus laughed. A low and condescending sound. "I see that Sarah managed to indoctrinate you against me. What a pity. I expected more emotional maturity from a daughter of mine." "Emotional maturity?" Emily took a step forward, anger overcoming fear. "You planned my entire life as if I were an object, orchestrated my meeting with Nathan, manipulated my feelings, brought me to this house as part of some sick ritual, and you call that maturity? I call it destiny fulfilled." Marcus rose from the armchair, revealing an imposing height that made Emily feel small. "You think it was a coincidence meeting Nathan at that event? That your feelings for him are genuine? My dear, I've been preparing this moment for 26 years. Nathan finally found his voice. "What are you talking about, Marcus?" "I'm talking about the purpose for which you two were created. Emily carries my superior genes combined with Sarah's spiritual sensitivity. You were molded since childhood to be the perfect complement for her. Together, you will generate the next phase of human evolution." Emily felt bile rise up her throat. "You're completely insane." "Insane. I transformed 3 generations of ordinary people into extraordinary beings. I developed conditioning techniques that can mold human personality like clay in the hands of a skilled artist." Marcus walked to the window, observing the landscape outside. Nathan demonstrated this perfectly. 27 years of life, and he managed to bring exactly 17 women to this room, each representing a different aspect of the female personality that I needed to study. "They weren't guinea pigs," said Nathan, his voice laden with an anger Emily had never heard before. "They were people, human beings with dreams, fears, stories of their own." "They were research material," corrected Marcus coldly. "Just as you were my instrument of data collection, and now that I have sufficient information on how to create the perfect environment for Emily to fall in love and voluntarily accept her role, we can proceed to the final phase." Emily looked at Nathan, seeing in his face the same horror she felt. "You knew about this?" "No, God, no." Nathan ran his hands through his hair, the agitated gesture revealing his internal agitation. I thought I was making my own choices, That I brought those women because I felt lonely, because I wanted connection. And you did feel that, agreed Marcus with a false paternal tone, because I programmed you to feel exactly that. The drugs your adoptive mother administered when you were a child, the hypnosis sessions disguised as meditation, the rituals you thought were just religious eccentricities. Everything was carefully orchestrated to shape your instincts and needs. Emily felt as if the floor were moving beneath her feet. And me? How did you program me if I fled when I was 9 years old? Marcus smiled, and this time the smile reached his eyes, making it even more terrifying. Ah, my dear, you think you really fled? The question hit Emily like a punch to the stomach. Flashes of memories began to reorganize in her mind, not memories of escape, but of return. Secret visits during her adolescence, sessions she thought were dreams, encounters that her conscious mind had erased as a protection mechanism. The memory lapses, she whispered. Exactly. Every time you blacked out, you were with me. Learning, being conditioned, prepared for this moment. Marcus approached her slowly. Why do you think you chose to work exactly for Nathan's subsidiary company? That you developed a specialization in contracts that coincidentally made you review documents that would catch his attention? That you attended an event you would normally avoid on the exact night he would be there? Emily backed up until her back touched the wall. The manipulation had been much deeper and more subtle than she had imagined. Not just her stay in that house, but years of her adult life had been orchestrated as a long preparation for that moment. But my mother's letter, she said I was strong enough to resist. Sarah was an incorrigible romantic. She genuinely believed that maternal love could overcome scientific conditioning. Marcus stopped a few meters away. But observe what happened, Emily. Despite all her warnings, you came. You stayed. You fell in love with Nathan exactly as I planned. No, said Nathan suddenly, advancing between Emily and Marcus. She stayed because she chose to stay. She fell in love because I deserved her love, not because of programming. Marcus laughed. My dear boy, do you really believe you managed to win her heart on your own merit? That your conversations, your gestures, your very personality weren't shaped by me since childhood to be exactly what Emily unconsciously sought in a partner? The question hung in the air like poison. Emily looked at Nathan, seeing doubt beginning to grow in his eyes. It was impossible to distinguish between genuine feelings and programming when your entire life had been built on false foundations. It doesn't matter, she finally said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. It doesn't matter how it began or who planned what. What matters is what we choose to do now. Marcus raised an eyebrow. And what do you choose, my daughter? Emily looked around the room, the place where she had spent 21 days questioning her sanity, discovering terrible truths about her origin, confronting parts of herself she preferred to keep hidden. Then she looked at Nathan, seeing in him not the mysterious and powerful man who had fascinated her that first night, but someone as lost and manipulated as she was. I choose to break your rules, your predictions, your carefully elaborated plans. Emily moved away from the wall, walking until she was face to face with Marcus. You made a fatal error in your calculations. And what would that error be? Emily smiled, and for the first time since she had arrived at that house, she felt completely in possession of herself. You assumed I wanted to be saved, but I don't need salvation. I never did. What I always wanted was to be able to choose for myself. Before Marcus could respond, Emily turned to Nathan. You want to know if what you feel for me is real or programming? Then let's find out together. Away from here, away from him, away from this elaborate theater. She extended her hand. Come with me, not because you were programmed to come, but because you choose to come. Nathan looked at the extended hand, then at Marcus, who was observing the scene with a mixture of irritation and scientific curiosity. If you leave now, said Marcus calmly, you'll never know if your feelings are genuine. There will always be doubt corroding your relationship. Then we'll live with the doubt, responded Nathan, taking Emily's hand, because even programmed feelings can become genuine when you choose to honor them every day. Marcus shrugged. Very well, but remember that you can't flee from your own nature forever. When the programming reassumes control, and it will reassume, remember that I warned you. Emily and Nathan walked toward the door of the room, but before leaving she turned one last time. Marcus, there's one thing you never understood about manipulation. It only works on people who don't know they're being manipulated. Now that we know, you've lost all power over us. They left the room hand in hand, leaving Marcus alone with his frustration and his ruined plans. But Emily knew that the real test was just beginning. Could they build something real on foundations of lies? Time would tell. Emily and Nathan ran through the corridors of the mansion like fugitives from a prison that had been constructed not just with walls and locks, but with years of psychological conditioning. Their steps echoed on the polished marble, and Emily could feel the weight of the gazes from the women painted in the antique pictures, no longer as silent judges of her situation, but as witnesses to her liberation. They stopped only when they reached the basement where Michael remained connected to the machines that kept his body functioning. Nathan hesitated at the door, but Emily pulled him inside. They needed to properly say goodbye to the man who had made everything possible by revealing the truth. Michael was awake, as if he had been waiting for them. His eyes shone with a lucidity that Emily hadn't seen before, as if the destruction of the ritual chamber had also released part of the energy that kept him trapped in that state of semi-consciousness. "You succeeded," he said, his voice stronger than before. "I can feel the difference in the air. The house is lighter." Emily knelt beside the bed, taking Michael's cold hand between hers. "We came to say goodbye. We're leaving, but we don't want to leave you here alone." "I won't be alone," replied Michael with a smile that carried genuine peace. "For the first time in 15 years, the voices of the dead women have gone quiet. They found rest when you destroyed the altar, and I can finally rest too." Nathan approached the bed, touching his brother's shoulder with a tenderness that Emily had never seen in him. "Michael, I'm so sorry. For all these years. For not having realized what was happening. For having perpetuated the cycle. You were a child when it all began, Nathan, and afterward you became a victim as much as any of those women." Michael squeezed Emily's hand and looked at his brother. "But now you have the chance to write a different story. Don't waste that opportunity trying to carry guilt that doesn't belong to you." Emily felt tears burning her eyes. How will we know if we manage to build something real? How will we distinguish between genuine love and programming? Michael closed his eyes for a moment, as if consulting some inner wisdom. "Genuine love grows with time, Emily. It strengthens when you face difficulties together, when you disagree and still choose to stay. Programming is static, always the same, always predictable. You'll know the difference." Nathan leaned over the bed. "Come with us, Michael. We can find better treatments, specialist doctors." "No," said Michael with surprising firmness. "My body passed the point of return long ago. The machines aren't keeping me alive. They're prolonging an existence that should have ended years ago. It's time for me to join the women who were freed today." Emily understood what he was asking, and the weight of the decision hit her like an avalanche. "Michael, are you sure?" "Absolutely. I spent 15 years waiting for this moment, when I could finally rest knowing that the cycle was broken, that you are free." Michael squeezed her hand one last time. "Emily, there's a red switch behind the machines. When you leave, wait 15 minutes and then turn it off. It will be quick and painless." Nathan turned abruptly. "I can't do that to you." "You're not doing anything to me," said Michael gently. "You're giving me the gift I've always wanted, the choice to depart on my own terms, knowing that my death will have meaning." Emily stood up, wiping the tears from her face. She knew Michael was right, but that didn't make the decision less painful. "How can we thank you for everything you did? For us? Live, love truly. Build a family based on free choice, not on obligation or programming. And when you have children, if you choose to have them, tell them the story of how you broke a cycle of generations." Michael smiled one last time. "That will be all the gratitude I need." Emily and Nathan said goodbye to Michael with careful embraces, avoiding the tubes and wires that connected him to the machines. When they left the basement, They walked in silence until they reached the main terrace of the mansion, where the helicopter that had brought them was still parked. Nathan knew the basic controls. Another product of his elaborate education, Emily realized with bitter irony. As he prepared the aircraft for takeoff, she looked one last time at the house that had been her prison, and strangely, also her liberation. It was a beautiful place, architecturally impressive, but Emily knew it could never again be inhabited by people who sought genuine love. The shadow of what had happened there would remain forever. "Are you ready?" asked Nathan, adjusting the controls. Emily nodded, entering the helicopter. 15 minutes later, when they were flying over the ocean toward the mainland, she closed her eyes and whispered a silent prayer for Michael, knowing that at that exact moment he was finding the peace he so deserved. The flight to New York City lasted 2 hours. During the entire journey, Emily and Nathan barely spoke, each lost in their own thoughts about what they had discovered and what to do with that information. The city spread below them like a carpet of lights, representing infinite possibilities and a future they could finally choose for themselves. They landed at LaGuardia Airport when the sun was rising, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold that seemed to symbolize a new beginning. Nathan turned off the engines and turned to look at Emily, his dark eyes full of a vulnerability that she was learning to recognize as genuine. "What now?" he asked. Emily pondered the question for a long moment. They had both lost references about who they really were, about which of their feelings were authentic and which were products of manipulation. But perhaps that wasn't necessarily bad. Perhaps it was an opportunity to rediscover themselves without the layers of conditioning they had carried throughout their lives. "Now we start from scratch," she finally said. "No games, no manipulation, no predefined roles. Just two adults trying to discover if they can build something real together." Nathan extended his hand, and Emily took it. There was no longer the desperate intensity of the first days, nor the sensation of inevitability that Marcus had tried to impose. It was just the simple choice of two wounded human beings deciding to face uncertainty together. "There's one thing I need to know," said Emily as they descended from the helicopter. "If we discover that our feelings were just programming, if we can't build something genuine, will you be able to let me go?" Nathan stopped walking and looked her directly in the eyes. "Yes, because if I truly love you, I want your happiness above my own need to have you near me." Emily smiled, feeling for the first time since she had met him that she was conversing with the real man, not with a version of him shaped by others' expectations. "Then let's find out together who we really are, when nobody else is writing the script of our lives." They walked toward the airport exit hand in hand, two survivors of a manipulation that had lasted generations, ready to discover if they could transform the fragments of their broken identities into something new and true. Behind them, the helicopter remained parked on the runway, a final link to a past they had chosen to leave behind. The future stretched before them like a blank page, frightening in its infinite possibilities, but also liberating in its total absence of predestination. For the first time in their lives, Emily and Nathan were completely free to write their own story. 6 months later, Emily woke up in the small apartment in Brooklyn Heights that they had rented together, with the golden light of the New York morning filtering through the simple cotton curtains. Beside her, Nathan slept deeply, his face relaxed in an expression of peace that she had learned to recognize as genuine. There was no longer the constant tension that had marked the first months after leaving the mansion, when both questioned every gesture, every word, every feeling they experienced. The early times had been difficult in ways that neither had anticipated. Accustomed to extreme intensity, he as controller, she as controlled, they had to learn to navigate the normality of a relationship between equals. Discussions about banal things like which supermarket to frequent or what movie to watch transformed into battlefields where each fought against the tendency to fall into old patterns. Emily had insisted on individual therapy for both before they tried any form of couples counseling. Nathan had resisted at the beginning, arguing that they had already identified the sources of their problems, but she was inflexible. "Knowing the origin of the wound isn't the same as healing it," she had said, and he ended up agreeing. Dr. Thomas Wilson, the psychologist Emily chose after extensively researching professionals specialized in trauma and psychological manipulation, was clear from the first session. You're going to need to rebuild your personalities from scratch. Distinguish between who you are and who you were programmed to be. It's a long and sometimes painful process. He was right. There were days when Emily woke up questioning if her love for strong coffee was genuine or a preference implanted during the mornings in the mansion. Nathan had spent weeks avoiding any gesture that could be interpreted as possessive, to the point of asking permission to hug her. Both had to learn to trust not only each other, but themselves. The apartment in Brooklyn Heights had been strategically chosen, small enough to force them to negotiate space and differences, but with 2 independent exits in case one of them needed time alone. Emily had kept her job at the multinational, though she had changed to a different department. Nathan had liquidated a large part of his businesses, keeping only ethical investments that didn't require his constant presence. The first real argument happened 3 months after leaving the mansion. Emily had suggested they visit Paul, her adoptive father, and Nathan reacted with an irrational jealousy that left them both shaken. "You don't want to introduce me to your family because you're ashamed of me," he had accused, and Emily exploded. "I don't want to mix our new life with people who knew me when I was still a walking lie." The discussion lasted hours, with both saying things they didn't really mean, reacting to fears they didn't even know they possessed. It was Dr. Wilson who helped them understand they were projecting insecurities about their identities onto the relationship, using the other as a mirror for their own doubts about who they really were. "You need to stop trying to prove that you're real," he had explained during one of the few joint sessions. "Reality isn't proven, it's lived. Stop analyzing every feeling and simply begin experiencing them." The advice had been transformative. Emily stopped questioning if her passion for poetry books was authentic and simply began writing her own poems. Nathan discovered he genuinely enjoyed cooking, not as a form of control or possessive care, but as creative expression. Slowly, versions of themselves began to emerge that neither had known before. The definitive turning point happened on a December afternoon when they were walking through Greenwich Village, and a torrential rain began. They ran to take shelter under an awning, laughing like teenagers, and when they looked at each other, wet hair, clothes clinging to their bodies, genuine laughter, Emily knew with absolute certainty that what she felt for that disheveled and vulnerable man had nothing to do with programming or conditioning. "I love you," she had said, the words coming as naturally as breathing. "Not the man who kidnapped me, not the powerful CEO, not someone's project. I love you, Nathan. The person who chooses every day to be better than yesterday." He kissed her right there in the rain, with people running past them, and it was the first kiss that felt completely theirs, without invisible audience, without predetermined script. Just 2 human beings celebrating the discovery that they could choose to love each other. Now, 6 months later, Emily watched Nathan sleep, and he felt a deep gratitude for all the difficult choices that had brought them to that moment of perfect simplicity. He woke up as if feeling her gaze, turning to face her with those dark eyes that had lost all shadow of manipulation. "Good morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning," she replied, leaning in to kiss his forehead. "Did you dream of anything?" "I dreamed we were normal people who met in a normal way and fell in love in a normal way," Emily laughed. "What a boring dream." "It was wonderful," said Nathan, pulling her closer. "No isolated mansions, no family secrets, no psychological manipulation, just a man and a woman deciding to build a life together." "And what do you think? Can we be normal?" Nathan considered the question seriously. "I think we can be real, which is better than normal." Emily nestled against his chest, listening to the steady heartbeat that had become the soundtrack of her mornings. "Nathan, there's something I need to tell you." She felt his body tense slightly, an automatic reaction that both were still learning to control when the other mentioned something to tell. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was laden with complex emotions. Emily knew that Nathan was processing not just the news, but all the implications it carried. A child would be the definitive proof that they had managed to create something genuine together, but it would also bring memories of the programming that Marcus had tried to imprint about the next generation of the lineage. How long have you known? A week. I wanted to be sure before telling you. Nathan moved away enough to look her in the eyes. And how do you feel? Scared, excited, worried if we'll be good parents considering where we came from. Emily touched his face. And you? Nathan closed his eyes, and Emily could see the thought process happening behind the closed eyelids. When he opened them again, there were tears, but also an iron determination. I feel like it's the first thing that's truly ours, not planned by Marcus, not foreseen by Michael, not a result of programming, just a natural consequence of two people who love each other and decided to create a life together. Emily smiled, feeling a deep peace settle in her chest. Then let's do differently. Let's raise our child with true love, freedom of choice, and respect for their individuality. Let's break the cycle definitively. And if we discover we don't know how to be normal parents, then we'll learn together, making mistakes, getting it right sometimes, asking for help when necessary. Emily kissed him softly. We don't have to be perfect, Nathan. We just have to be real. Nathan embraced her with a tenderness that had taken months to develop, not the desperate intensity of the first days, nor the controlling possessiveness that had marked their initial relationship, but the careful affection of someone who understands the value of what they possess without needing to imprison it. I love you, Emily, not because I was programmed to love, not because you were sent to save me, but because every day you choose to be a person worth loving, and I choose to be someone worthy of your love. I love you too, Nathan, for who you are when nobody is watching, for how you treat the waiter at the cafe where we have breakfast on Sundays, for how you manage to be strong and vulnerable at the same time. They remained embraced as the morning advanced outside, two survivors of a manipulation that had lasted generations, now consciously creating something new and genuine. There were still scars from the past that they would probably carry forever, moments of doubt that would still visit them from time to time. But they had learned the fundamental difference between love that imprisons and love that liberates. On the nightstand beside the bed, a simple photo captured by a volunteer tourist during their outing in Greenwich Village showed two people laughing, in the rain, not perfect poses or studied smiles, but a moment of spontaneous joy that no script could have created. It was proof that they had succeeded. Two people who had been born to be pieces in other people's games had finally learned to play on their own. And the game they chose was called true love, complicated, imperfect, sometimes frightening, but completely theirs. Outside, New York City was awakening to another day filled with infinite possibilities, and inside the small